computer. All right. All right. So can y'all see the Mindful Spring into Action slide? Oh, no, you cannot because, okay. Did you just see the slide that I shared?
There it is.
Okay,
Yep.
now you're on it?
Yep.
How
Excellent.
about now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Took me a moment there, but I was able to talk myself through it. Oftentimes, self-coaching is a beautiful thing to have. So welcome, everyone. So tonight we're going to be sharing, like I said, Elizabeth's sharing a little bit about the core and the breath and the mechanics of the breath. And I'm going to be sharing some things about inviting movement into your life, or maybe you've thought about doing a 5K in the past and I guess I can take that off now. And you maybe want to know some of the steps on your way there. We'll be introducing you to some other ideas about fitness idealism and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll cover a little bit of about hydration and that its importance, and then a little bit about nutrition as well. I would love you to be in the class in whatever way is comfortable for you. So if you would like your camera off, you're more than welcome to do that, or you can keep it on. If you have questions, I think what would be best, we're going to take questions at the end. If you jot down your questions in a notebook, if you want to go grab one right now, if you don't have one, that would be great. And then at the end, either you could voice it, or you can put it in the chat, and then we don't even have to say whose question it is, if that's easier. Having said that, I sent everybody an agreement, and if we could keep this gathering in confidential, as far as somebody asking a question, we just want to keep confidence that they have our confidentiality with that, okay? So let's go to the first slide. So I really wanted to invite everybody, literally, to understand or be invited into this idea that at any size, we can explore movement, and it doesn't have to look exactly a certain way, and you don't have to be somebody or have a certain body to enjoy movement and explore movement, right? So sometimes we get these ideas that if you have this type of body, maybe this is a good movement for you. But I'm kind of trying to break out of those isms and kind of question those thoughts that maybe we have that maybe didn't even start to be our own. So that's the first thing. And then I just wanted to say that Vermont is an amazing playground, and there's all sorts of ways, as we know, with all 4 seasons that we can be active. So as we move towards spring, the photograph with the bikers it's part of the rail trail. So if you're a beginner biker and you're looking for a flatter path, I know around Waterbury there are hills everywhere. And if you're not quite ready for that, the rail trail, and you can look it up online, it has different places you can kind of jump on and do as much or as little as you want, is a really good place to start. As well as stand-up paddle boarding is a really fun activity. Down at the reservoir, I think they still rent boats for that. So the benefits of an active lifestyle are, I think I messed up let's see something. Pardon me. All right. Benefits of an active lifestyle are: reduces the risk of heart attack, lowers the risk for type 2 diabetes and some cancers, lowers blood pressure, strengthens bones, muscles, and joints, and lowers risk for developing osteoporosis, lowers the risk of falls, improves your ability to do daily activities, improves your mood, and may help lower the risk of depression. We're going to go over a little bit more about how movement can tie into a preventative or a helper, if you will, for anxiety and depression. So moving into that idea of the fitness idealism. So fitness idealism is a set of ideal standards and arbitrary requirements to participate in specific movement practices. And so fitness culture is often driven by the idealist imagery and an all or none messaging that sometimes leads us to believe that fitness has one set of rules, one look, and one hardcore vibe. This creates sometimes barriers, and it dismantles joy for some people who are just trying to figure out maybe what movement works for them. Oftentimes social media plays into this. We get these images that look so idealistic and perfect for maybe some bodies, and we're like, oh, that must not be for me because I don't look that way. So it's just a matter of questioning when you see something, where maybe the thinking comes behind those, right? Those messagings. So sometimes when we're convinced that there's only this one path, we decide to adopt these all or none fitness paths. So we, instead of taking things slowly or discovering what's best for our bodies, we sign up for the marathon thinking, oh, we need to do a marathon to look like this or to be like this. And sometimes it can put us in a cycle of going all out and then kind of crashing, and then it doesn't end up sustainable for our systems and our bodies. So the other thing about that is boutique fitness clubs are really big right now, especially in urban areas. And the cost of some classes in these areas is just too much and not affordable for most people, especially in the cities where you can't get out and have access to fresh air like we do. So when accessibility diminishes, when affordability kind of rises, accessibility diminishes. So that's something I just thought I'd kind of put out there, really thinking about what do we have accessible to us and who's putting sort of the standard of pricing on these things. The global movement fitness industry is valued at $96.6 billion. And oftentimes big box fitness companies tend to line their corporate pockets with this auto pay membership, which sometimes it's great for certain people who are going to use the gym, but sometimes it gives people a false sense of, oh, I'm paying this monthly fee, it's coming out of my checking account, so I'm kind of doing something. So I would just kind of ask if that resonates with you, that if you'd rather take those dollars and put it towards something that you would love more and think you would utilize more, right? And think about the way you're spending sort of your fitness dollars, if you will. So let me just see here. Some of the ways that we can avoid the pitfalls of fitness idealism are to choose activities that align with your now body. So exactly as you are right now, not needing to be a certain way, how would you love to move your body, right? And then align it with what works for your life too. So if you're super busy right now, if you're sandwiched in between taking care of kids, parents, or whatnot, you want to think about what is most appropriate for my timeline here. And if you're in a busy phase, a busy season, if you will, in your life, maybe you kind of think about doing something with a little less commitment. Explore movements that you're intrigued by and use discernment. How does it feel in your body? How do you feel 24 hours later, 48 hours later? Does it prevent you from enjoying your daily activities after the practice? And is that something maybe you could think about either softening the movement or figuring out a different movement for you? And then rather than using exercise punitively, so to burn calories as it's often sort of presented as, or to meet societal expectations, seek movement opportunities that really, once again, bring you joy. And maybe the movement activities that deliver this additional benefits. So maybe you love walking your grandkid in the stroller. Maybe when you move regularly, you notice your sleep is enhanced. And so you want to get better sleep regularly. Anytime you hear yourself say, I should do so-and-so because I ate a bag of Oreos or whatever, think about where the should comes from and just sort of ask yourself, does that make sense? Would I love to go for a walk, regardless of what you've eaten, right? So you want to think about using movement as, or keeping movement as a joy instead of using it as this chore that you have to do because something else was bad, of a choice maybe you made, that you feel you made. In my opinion, Oreos aren't bad if you eat them once in a while. Sorry. I digress. Okay. Respect your body where it is and don't rush to get into an ideal, and be really patient when you're beginning a new activity and your body adapts to that activity. So our bodies are in constant evolution, expanding and shrinking and birthing and aging. And it's really unfair to put unrealistic expectations and demands on ourselves. And it sets us up sometimes for duty-bound chores. And this duty-bound sort of I have to work out sometimes can sometimes lead to resentment in the brain, if we think of it more as a duty, as opposed to I get to go for a walk with my best friend tonight after work. It sounds really different. I get to go for a walk with my best friend than I have to go to the gym, right? Those are two separate ways of thinking about movement. So movement doesn't have to be structured around fitness or weight loss goals, as I've said. Shift your identity to somebody who's active. So rather than somebody who works out, somebody who's active, somebody that chooses to park furthest away from the entrance of where you work or the grocery store, somebody that loves playing with their grandkids, somebody that takes the stairs always when there's a choice of an elevator or stair, just because you're just an active being. So the next slide, we're going to take a moment and drop a little deeper into the body. And it's a quote by Nahira Waheed. And what I'd ask you to do is just plant your feet on the floor, or if you're seated crisscross, that's fine as well. Just sort of find your sits bones. And then just take the shoulders back a little and open up the collarbones and heart center. And then draw the elbows back, soften the jaw, soften the forehead. And her quote is, as I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I've been waiting my whole life for this. I've been waiting my whole life for this. So just take a nice deep breath as you embody that idea of, oh, this is my life and I can be my biggest support person along this journey. And I can choose things I love. Moving on to The Joy of Movement. It is a book, The Joy of Movement by Kelly McGonigal. And she has a ton of research on how exercise helps us find happiness, hope, connection, and courage. It's a great read if you're looking for some more evidence-based, science-based ways that exercise helps us. I'm going to go over a couple of the things that were in the book. So she talks about it reducing stress, lifts self-esteem, mental health and physical activity hand in hand help both. Physical activity helps mental health, improves mood, lowers the risk of depression and anxiety. So she talks about physical activity influences lots of brain chemicals, including those that give you energy, alleviate worry, and help you bond with others. It reduces inflammation in the brain, which over time can protect against depression, anxiety, and loneliness. Mind-altering effects of exercise are embedded in your musculature, And during physical activity, your muscles secrete hormones into the bloodstream that make your brain feel more resilient to stress. And scientists have coined this molecule the hope molecule. So simply by using your muscles, you actually secrete a hormone, and they've coined it the hope molecule. So I don't know about you, but coming out of a year of COVID, I'm okay having more hope molecules. Okay. The elusive runner's high, another chemical cocktail that flows through the body when one moves. Lucky for us, running isn't the only form of movement that creates the feel-good chemicals. According to Kelly McGonigal, her research shows movement as a whole releases neurotransmitters, in particular dopamine and endocannabinoids. I almost had that. That can generate a natural high similar to that of cannabis. So the release of chemicals create an inner atmosphere of the disappearance of worries or stress, a reduction of pain and the slowing of time, and a heightening of the senses. So the chemical cocktail that's known for runners is you can get that in other ways by moving your bodies. And cultures that still require hunting and gathering show less or no signs of cardiovascular disease, have low blood pressure, no measure of inflammation, and the absence of anxiety and depression. Whether this has anything to do with their active lifestyles is speculative, but when experiments in the US and the UK forced moderately active adults to become sedentary, their well-being withered. So that last part is kind of curious. So when you're used to being an active being and then you're told you can't be active and then your well-being diminishes, that says something about what movement is doing for people, right? And then next, studies demonstrate how mindfulness increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for helping us maintain self-control. So with just a few weeks of sustained practice, marked changes were visible in the actual structure and size of the participants' gray matter. So evidence shows increasing mindful minutes in your day can aid in preserving movement promises, creating skill power versus relying on willpower. So this is all about, we all think we can kind of willpower our way through things. And by the end of the day, it's scientifically shown that your willpower has diminished. But if you do things that are mindful practice, you can actually enhance the ability of your brain to make those choices and to more likely follow through with them. And then the French sociologist Emile Durkheim coined the term collective effervescence to describe the euphoric self-transcendence individuals feel when they move together in ritual, prayer, or work. And Durkheim believed that these activities helped individuals feel connected to one another and to something bigger than themselves. The joy of collective effervescence helps explain why fitness friendships and sports teams feel like family. The group experiences, they create feelings of solidarity and hope, and humans crave belonging, we know this. Collective action bonds strangers and builds trust. So when people discover movement that make them feel hopeful, happy, and provide a sense of purpose and connects them with others, they're literally moved to participate. So this is a picture 2 years ago of myself doing a race out in South Hero, which actually was a town I grew up in. And for myself personally, I feel better when I move my body. It helps me integrate my life, and life has a way of sort of kind of crashing down on us, and then it ebbs and flows with good and bad, and that's the reality of life. So for myself personally, I remember training for this race. This was in the fall, and I trained all summer, and just the release and help that this race helped me through that summer, and training with one of my friends and talking about everything. And then at the end of the race, this is at Folsom Elementary School where I went to grade school. And my dad, who passed away at 64 from a heart attack, he's buried right down the road from where the race is. So I was able to go over and put my medal on his gravestone. And it was a real cathartic experience for me. But it wasn't necessarily about moving through the finish line of this race. It was all the steps I took on the way to get there was spiritual for me, and it was a way for me to connect. So that's a little bit about that. And then the 5K tips. This is the 5K we did 2019 as a group. If you want to do a 5K, a really good one in Richmond is an all-women's 5K. I'm not sure with COVID if they're doing it. It's usually in July. That's one of the ones we did as a group. So it's just some real quick tips. Allow for plenty of training time before the event. 6 to 8 weeks is ideal if you're not currently running. Give yourself plenty of time. You want to start with jogging a little bit and then walking. So jogging maybe 30 seconds and then walking to recover fully. And then maybe you move on to a minute. And there's plenty of 5K kind of couch to 5K programs online that you can kind of Google and just print out if you're looking to do that this summer. Build up your miles slowly. You don't want to add any more than 10% each week. And you want to, at the beginning, avoid running back-to-back days. So give yourself that nice 48-hour window of recovery when you're just letting your body adapt to that increased running. Make sure you warm up before, and make sure you use some stretching, some good stretches after you work out, after you run. And then the rest is as important as training. So your body adapts and prepares for increased loads during the rest time. So it's actually, even though our culture has kind of thought about rest, relaxation as not doing anything, your body is actually in its state of repair and adaptation, if you will. So rest is really important. If you wanted to cross-train during the rest with low-impact activities or some stretching, that's perfectly fine. And then some ideas to dress for comfort. You know, get fitted to a pair of running shoes, perhaps. If you have an old pair of shoes that you've walked in for 4 or 5 years, it might be time to invest in a nice, good, supportive pair of running sneakers. And there's several places I think that still fit. Ski Rack, I think, is one of them that does sneaker fitting. And then the Feet Fleet in Essex Junction, I believe they're still doing the fitting running shoes. Sports bras are important, so make sure if that's one investment that you need to invest in, don't skimp on it. If you need a good sports bra, it's worth the money. If you're biking this summer, bike shorts are a godsend. So bike shorts with the padding, those also may be a little pricey, but so worth it. And you can wear them all summer long, the same pair. And then chafing gels. So sometimes when we run or move our bodies, the skin rubs in certain areas, inner thighs, arms, different areas. So there's all sorts of chafing gels and ointments, creams on the market if you wanted to look into some of those. And then summer running, just make sure maybe a hat and some sunscreen and protect yourself. And if you know you don't love running in the heat, an early morning run or after the sun goes down is important. So choosing a schedule that's ideal for you. If you're not a morning person, it doesn't make any sense to say, I'm going to get up every morning at 4:30. Kind of just really think about how you want this to look for your schedule. And a running buddy and a training group. So this is our 5K. Let's see, this is two of the pictures are from the Richmond run. The other second 5K we did together, the beginners group, was done the Leaf Peepers, which came back into town. So the route was around River Road for those of you who are from Waterbury. Being with a group is, and training, it is that effervescence feeling. It is that group community that you're all tethered in a certain way. And I'm personally not doing a training group this year with the logistics of COVID, but eventually we'll all be back to that soon enough. So if that's something that it sounds appealing to you, maybe look for a beginner program sometime. Up in the corner, the woman, Pat, she actually came in the top 3 for her age group at that 5K and was, as you can't tell, was not super proud. No, so proud, as I was. She did awesome. So running buddy or training group helps. As far as safety, run on the left side of the road. So you actually face traffic when you're running and walking. And then when you're biking, you go with traffic. That's the road etiquette. And then if you're running after dark or at dusk or whatever, something reflective is helpful. Know your route and share your route. So tell your family where you're heading out, what your pattern is going to be, right? Let people know where you are. Some overtraining symptoms are if you're constantly sore and don't feel like you're recovering, nagging little injuries that don't seem to heal, chronic fatigue, decline in performance. That's a little bit more of an advanced overtraining symptoms. So then we'll move right into hydration. Hydration, your body's made up of water, a lot of water, 70% water. You've probably heard that before. Obviously, blood being a large part of that volume. The blood transfers lots of good nutrients and antibodies, and it helps remove waste. And so some of the supporting factors, hydration can help you with improved mood, memory, regulate body temperature, prevent headaches and muscle fatigue, muscle cramping even, relieve constipation and improve digestion, increases energy, relieving fatigue. Mild hydration can slow down metabolism and increase hunger. So if you've ever had a older relative who's been dehydrated and then you not really sure what's wrong and they do end up in the hospital and then they have an IV of fluids and they perk back up, you've seen this happen in real life, real time. If you are wondering about sports drinks, if you're not training and working out over a half an hour at a time, you don't necessarily need them. However, if it's really hot, really humid, and you are profusely sweating a lot, it might be something to consider to get some of those electrolytes back into you. So a couple ways to make hydration a priority is just begin your day with an internal bath, if you will. Just drink a large glass of water, preferably kind of room temperature, not with ice. So in Ayurvedic studies, you wouldn't want to put out the gut fire, your digestive fire, if you will. So you'd want to make it not ice water, just regular water. Start your day with that, your internal bath, if you will, and then just keep drinking throughout the day. Obviously, you want to prevent it interrupting your sleep at night. So you want to get most of your hydration done in the morning and early afternoon and not wait until the last minute at night and then feel like you have to drink, 52 ounces of water. So some things that have worked for me is I've created a few rituals with hydration. I have this promise I keep to myself that when I head out, I have a water bottle in my car and I finish it before I get to my home. And then if you eat more veggies and fruits with high water content, that's a nice way to get that in the summer. And those are nice, usually cooling foods for the summer too. So the only thing I'll say about nutrition tonight, originally when Alicia and I did the 5K talk, we talked about she was doing her training after work, so it was really important for her to pack her healthy meals, number one, so that she had that consistent energy through the day, and then a snack in the evening. There's a couple quotes here from Michael Pollan. I think it's pretty hard not to find information on what we kind of know is most helpful in our bodies as far as nutrients. So if you're looking to improve nutrition, just think about what is one of, I don't know if this is his quote or not. Somebody says, if it's made from a plant, you're good. If it's made in a plant, you might want to reconsider. I don't know if that's Michael's or not, but it's somebody's. So whole foods are loaded with important nutrients. Usually whole foods are lower in sugar. They contain natural fats as opposed to processed oils. More environmentally sustainable, which helps reduce waste in packaging. Helps support local farmers. So these are all things that are really good for everybody. Are higher in fiber. Fiber is queen. Good for gut and digestion. So that's a little quick nutrition inspiration. And I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth is going to share some about our core.
So I'll just use my, like, the arrow, right?
Yep, the arrow on the right will get you to the next screen.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So as Becky said, I'm a physical therapist. I work at CVMC and Pelvic Health. And I'm excited to be here. I really like working with women on getting moving or getting more comfortable with moving, or maybe back after an injury. So thank you, Becky, for having me and sharing your space with Reliable Internet. So the first thing I wanted to do was really just go over the core. I think when I think of the word core, I think of a very hard center. I think of maybe one or two dimensions when I think of abdominals. And what's important is that this is a system. It's a moving system. And the core is really made up of our diaphragm that sits on top, our pelvic floor, which is the floor of our system. The muscle is called the transversus abdominis. It's a deep abdominal muscle, and it really wraps around if I stand up, just around the abdominal, what we call the canister. So it goes all the way to the back and then attaches in the front. And then there's deep back muscles that make this system up. So I think what's important is that we understand that these muscles work together, and that they need to move. So any muscle that we use, if we even think about like the bicep muscle, if I only used it in this one position, it would be really hard to function. So I need to use it in both a lengthening and a shortening way. And I think a lot of times I get questions about, people say, I have a weak core. I know I have a weak core. Like, what should I do for my core? And again, I start with the anatomy and just really understanding that this is a system. And one of the best things that we can do for this system is to breathe. So I like this picture because it shows mostly the diaphragm and pelvic floor, but that it is moving with our breath. So it is one of the best core exercises, and it's engaging all parts of the system. So the diagram on the left shows what is happening with an inhale. So as you breathe in, and I invite you just to put your hands too, maybe on your belly, and just feel this for yourself. Sometimes one hand on the chest and one hand on the belly, just to observe what's happening. But when we breathe in, the diaphragm drops down, and it allows for those lungs to fill with air, and that pushes on the abdominal cavity, which actually pushes the belly out and pushes on the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor drops down a little bit. When we exhale, that diaphragm lifts up and helps compress the air out of the lungs. The abdominal muscles shorten and compress the abdominal contents, and the pelvic floor lifts. So many of us are familiar with a Kegel. So a Kegel would really occur more with the exhale, where that pelvic floor lifts. So I think I'm going to leave this picture up, but what I thought would maybe be helpful is just to go over some myths about the core. And Becky already even just kind of spoke about this fitness idealism. And I think sometimes we have this idealism towards the way maybe, we're supposed to use our core or our abdominal muscles, or how it's supposed to feel. And so one that I've heard is I'm supposed to hold my core in with exercise. And I'm going to use running as an example of this. But if we really challenge that with what we know to be true in other areas of our body, so if we think about our quadriceps, our thigh muscles, and if I had you straighten your knee and really tighten your quadricep, okay, and if I asked you to hold it in that position, a shortened position, while you run, it wouldn't be possible. So one, it wouldn't allow for movement, right? So again, we know this is a dynamic system and it allows us to move. If it was a very static and solid system that didn't move, we wouldn't be able to move. The other thing is that moving my quadricep, moving my muscles allows me to absorb shock. So I think about this really in terms of the abdominal area, people feeling like they need to hold this tight, and that's kind of what they need to be doing when they move, or also even with the pelvic floor, that they should be clenching or doing a Kegel the whole time. And just kind of reminding ourselves that those muscles need to move. They need to lengthen, they need to shorten, they need to move the way they're designed to do that. Another myth is that your core should always be tight, right? So I'm always supposed to be engaged. And I think the system is really, it's designed very well. We don't have to always be thinking and conscious about holding in our core. I think sometimes that can be counterproductive. And one of my mentors, Julie Weeb, likes to use just the balloon as a kind of model for this. So I have the balloon. On the top is my diaphragm, my abdominal muscles are in the middle, and my pelvic floor is on the bottom. And a lot of times I work with people who maybe they have some pelvic floor difficulties, maybe they're leaking, but one of the things that we notice is that sometimes they are holding. So they may be feeling like they're supposed to hold their core in all the time. And hopefully my balloon can show you this, but if I'm holding in the muscles, the very top part of my belly, look at what that does to my lower belly, and look at what that does to the bottom of my core system, right? So this is really a pressure system. And if I'm clenching here and not allowing movement, that pressure is going to be forced down. So that puts a lot more strain on the pelvic floor, and sometimes it can't meet the demands. So again, muscles are supple. That's how they function best. And so we want these core muscles to be supple and to move. So the question is, well, what are some things that I can do to help support my movement? And one I would say is breathing. That's why I love this slide, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So just even starting to engage or notice what you're doing when you're moving. If you're holding your breath, or are you able to breathe? It's not realistic to think you're going to do this big diaphragmatic breath all the time. But I would say starting to incorporate some movement. So I'll invite you, if you'd like to do this, just to stand. And I just want you to, again, put a hand maybe on your chest and a hand on your belly. Take a breath in. And now I'm going to ask you to actually think about tightening your abdominal muscles. Okay, think about what we just talked about, that sometimes we have this belief we need to really tighten them. And then I want you to try to take a breath again. And so for me, that really makes my breath much more shallow. I'm going to assume that for you, if you're trying this, that you're noticing that too. So again, I think there's a lot that comes up for us when we're maybe allowing ourselves to just to breathe into that lower belly, feeling like, is that really what I'm supposed to be doing? Is that how it's supposed to be looking? But again, just really kind of reminding ourselves that these muscles need to move. So if I have you with that inhale, think about moving that breath down to the lower belly and allowing that lower belly to expand. And just noticing what changes with the breath. the other thing I would invite you to do is even just shifting your position. So maybe that's shoulders back, or maybe that's even just leaning forward as if you're leaning into a headwind, and feeling what happens with the breath. Or maybe it's shifting our weight back. And I bring this up because, again, this is a system that's part of a much bigger system, our body, and they are linked. So thinking about kind of how you're holding yourself or the mobility that you have there can impact your breath as well. So that kind of moves into my second recommendation in terms of ways to support yourselves with your movement would be to do a form of mobility. And I think Becky talked about this, like flexibility at the end of your routine. So mobility for your trunk, mobility for your hips, for your legs, just making that part of a really nourishing movement practice for you. And the last thing, and again, Becky's already said this, but I would just recommend really building your movement, your fitness based on what feels good for your body. I think a lot of times, like when we have those shoulds that come in, again, even with the core, I should be doing it this way, or I should be moving in this way. I think if we're able, and it's challenging at times, but kind of dropping in and listening to how our body feels, that we can kind of move at our own pace, and that's okay, and add things to our movement routine or practice that feel good for our body. I would like to maybe just leave on, I know some of you might have some questions about pelvic floor. And so there's some signs and symptoms that might suggest it's helpful for you to follow up with a therapist who specializes in pelvic floor, or maybe you're just kind of curious about consulting with one. But certainly symptoms would be discomfort. And I think about that in terms of your back, your abdomen, your pelvis, your perineum, in the area of the legs. Even, we think of pelvic pain really being from the belly button to the knees. Incontinence, leakage, any heaviness that you might feel in the pelvic floor or the perineum. Maybe you have difficulty activating some of these muscles. You don't know, if you're really performing a pelvic floor contraction or relaxation. And if you notice breath holding, so if you really feel like, as I'm thinking about this, geez, that is one of my strategies. I hold my breath with maybe simple movements or, moderately hard movements. But to use that strategy all the time might just suggest, okay, it might be helpful to look at how you're coordinating that system. So I think in the notes, we'll have contact information that if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and you could certainly reach out. So thank you again. I'm going to step over here.
Right. Thanks, Elizabeth. So as she said, at the very end, I will put up a slide that has her email, both the pelvic floor email and the CVMC email for, which she does pelvic floor both, but you'll have two addresses to choose from. So real quickly, because I want to save a little bit of time for questions for Q&A, the American Heart Association recommends getting at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous. So that moderate, there's, once again, if you go online, there's ways to figure out your maximum heart rate, and the moderate intensity is 50 to 75% of your maximum heart rate, and the vigorous is up to 85%. A combination of both of these are fine, and I just put this up because this is another way, if you don't want to try to get a heart rate monitor watch or anything. Perceived rate of exertion is often used, and we all know we love our good emojis. So if you are working in the zone where you're just cruising along and chatting with your friend, chances are you're on that lower spectrum. If you're on the upper spectrum, like I'm sweating a lot, I can't even talk, but I can maybe squeeze out a word or two, then you're moving into the upper spectrum, right? And then, so I'm just going to follow that up with the caveat: regular leisure time exercise of any intensity for as little as 10 minutes provides protection against future depression. And this is another research article I had read. And then I want to follow it up again, with the blue zone. I don't know if you're familiar with the blue zone. So these are areas of the world where there's the most centurions who live there. So one of them's in Japan, Italy, Greece, and Costa Rica. I believe Linda Loma in California is also considered one. But these, if you notice on their movement, it says move naturally. Find ways to move more. And so these are not people who are working out. These are people tending to their gardens. And obviously the blue zones have all these other variables playing into it, right? Community is a big part of it. Yeah. And if you're curious about it, look it up. I think Dan Buettner has a book, the Blue Zone book, that has all the research on it. It's very fun to read about. So, leaving you sort of following up that with one pebble the size of a sesame seed ripples the width of a pond. So any little bit of movement you do through the day can aggregate towards a more mobile body, a lift in your spirit, a little bit more cardiovascular health. So don't think of it as, I can't go for a 30-minute run, so I'm not going to go. It literally could mean I have 5 minutes between a meeting, I'm going outside, and I've got that 5 minutes, I'm going to do it, right? Right now, a lot of people are working from home, sort of tethered to desk. Take an opportunity if you have to take a phone call, to get up and stretch and maybe march around a little bit while you're on the phone. So all these little things you can kind of work into your movement diet, if you will, they're all beneficial. It doesn't have to look a certain way. You don't have to necessarily, even though the American Heart Association puts out recommendations, doesn't need to meet that expectation. So I'm going to buzz through the compelling why. Research shows that having a compelling why can fuel motivation. So this is the idea that if you kind of sit and maybe journal about, why do I want to move more? What benefits do I think it would bring my life? And this is often, movement practice is often done a little bit now and throughout your life. These are like little tiny investments you're making into your bank account, if you will, because it shows up in the end. Oftentimes, one of my compelling whys is my mom had open heart surgery several years ago, and I was sandwiched in between trying to get my 4 kids. I think the 3 of them were in college at the time, moving, and you can just imagine sort of the sandwiching. And then I was the full-time back and forth to Burlington. And one of my compelling whys is I kind of know what my predispositions are. I believe in epigenetics, so I'm just going to make really good choices. And, you know, I might not be able to avoid everything that my kids have to help me with in later years, but doing the best I can to sort of put little deposits in my bank account with movement. And my other compelling why is, I think that movement and our bodies, our physical bodies, are here to carry our hearts and our heads around. And our hearts and our heads, because we have to create and think about how we want to be in this world and what our sole purpose is, and how we want to be in community, and how we want to share ourselves in loving ways, and be receptive to love. By moving my body personally on a regular, at regular intervals, it allows me to do that. It allows me to embody my body that is just kind of like this transportation for like the bigger stuff, like the heart stuff, spirit stuff. I won't go into any more of that, but that's one of mine. So the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart, Helen Keller. So sometimes it's sort of like that idea, you move more, you feel better, you're not quite sure maybe what the layer is that's lifting, and it really doesn't matter, right? You can just celebrate the feeling. So here's our email addresses. Elizabeth's 2 emails are there for you. Please reach out to her with if you have concerns and you want to meet up with somebody. She also does orthotics. Do you do orthotics all the time? So I see her at the clinic. She sometimes is doing the molds for orthotics. So I'm going to leave that up, and then I am going to somehow get back to the chat. And what I'd like you to do, or actually, if you could jot down the websites, or emails rather, if you want, I will follow this up with an email to everybody and send this back out to you. But if you either screenshot this right now or write down what you want, and then I'll move back to where we can get to the chat to see if there's any questions for Elizabeth or myself real quick before we part ways. There's something else I was just going to say and I can't remember. Okay.
We're going to send the journal prompts.
Oh yeah, and I have some journal prompts that will go along with this, and I'll send that as well. So I'll send all this information and then the journal prompts. So let me stop the share. I need to escape. Okay, so let's see, the chat. If you have a question, let us know. It looks like nobody's asking a question, so I think we're good there. Oh wait. Okay, so thank you, Elizabeth, and to everyone for being here. You're very welcome.
You're welcome. Thank
Elizabeth,
you.
bring your chair
Okay.
over. Let's see. I think that was the only one. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, thank you all for turning out on such a gorgeous night. I will follow up with those journal prompts and the information. You're very welcome, Carmel. And yeah, thanks for joining the gathering and getting some more information on how to be inspired to move more and be embodied this spring. May you have lots of healthy movement and have a blast.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much, both of you. I just thoroughly enjoyed it and your presentation. Bless you both. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Judy.
you, Judy.
Take care.
Before you sign off, we should talk about how you can stop the recording and we can.
I'm going to pause it.